All right, you all go to withoutyourhead.com. I'll come over there and put my boot up in your ass.
Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neil, and I'm joined by David Reynolds. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So, when recording this, yesterday was the 4th of July. Did you do anything special for Independence Day?
I wish I could tell you I had, but I actually didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was going to go out with some friends to watch the great fireworks and all that sort of thing, but it didn't happen. So I ended up spending some time with my uncle, who was an older man, and my brother and sister, and then I ended up watching some crap on YouTube and doing a lot of sleeping, which I needed to catch up on. So I was like Mr. Excitement yesterday.
All right, well, that's fair enough. At least you didn't call the cops on anybody for lighting off fireworks or anything. You weren't.
No, I didn't. I promise I didn't.
All right, excellent. So I actually met you a few years ago in Los Angeles for a panel. It was a House of a Thousand Corpses reunion panel, and I hosted that, it went very well. And I'm not sure if I asked you at the time. How did you get involved in House of a Thousand Corpses?
I had been in Los Angeles actually not that long. I think it was cast House of a Thousand Corpses. I think Rob held the initial audition sessions. I want to say I can't remember. It was either 98 or 99. Mm-hmm. And I had auditioned for Dean Frank and Pemrick and Frank, who were the casting directors for that movie. I just remember getting a call from my agent saying, hey, they want you to come in for this. It's a piece called House of a Thousand Corpses. And my first thought was, what the heck is that? I mean, House of a Thousand Corpses. I've done horror movies before, but that was a weird title. Mm-hmm. And then, and this will floor you, she said, oh, yeah, it's Rob Zombie's film. I had no idea who Rob Zombie was. All right, I admit it. Maybe I shouldn't, but there you are. Because my musical tastes are in a different direction. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I went to the audition. As I recall, we were put on tape, and then Rob made the decision from there. I don't recall that we went in, or at least I didn't go in for a callback. I don't think that's what happened. I just remember I got a call from my agent, Shirley Wilson at that time, and she said, they want you for this film. And I said, great. So that's initially how I got into the film. I didn't care that the part was a small one. I didn't care. It was going to be in a movie, Mm-hmm. Do you want me, should I go into like what happened after that, or do you want to question me more, or?
Yeah, you go in and we can bounce all around. That's fine.
Okay. Well, I remember the next thing after that. So I was cast. I don't think at that point I got the entire script. I didn't get the entire script till later. At any rate, the next thing I did was I went into Universal, to their backlot there where they have their costuming. And I'm trying to think. I think that was on a weekday afternoon. I was teaching at the time, so I went in after that. This must have been in 99, I think, or maybe late 98. At any rate, I went in, and I was greeted very pleasantly by, I think there were two ladies there, and then there was a gentleman there with these long dreadlocks and these monster sleeve tattoos. Uh-huh. And I, not knowing what I was doing, unfortunately I kept my mouth shut, I thought that was the costume designer. And the payoff for that will come in just a second. Uh-huh. Anyway, so we went to different clothing options, and I tried on different things until they agreed, oh, yes, we like this, we don't like that, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And as I was leaving, the guy who was in the scene with me, Chad, said to me, you know who that is, don't you? I said, no, I thought that was a costume designer. He goes, that's Rob Zombie. I was like, oh. So I'm glad I didn't say anything. Otherwise I would have appeared really stupid and maybe gotten myself kicked out of the film. At any rate, so we did the costume fitting, and then I think a couple weeks later, Rob asked for Chad and I, mm-hmm. Chad and me, excuse me, to come in. I think it was on a Saturday, to come in and rehearse with Michael J. Pollard and Sid Haig. Mm-hmm. He wanted to rehearse that scene where we burst in on them and then we get shot, etc. Mm-hmm. And so I remember we went over to Universal Studios for that, and the rehearsal went well. He was also Rob, I should say. Rob was very willing to let Chad and me do some improv in our opening dialogue, most of which didn't make the final cut. But at any rate, he was willing to allow us to do that. And I remember that Michael J. Pollard wanted to leave early because he had he had some kind of engagement where he was going to watch some horse races or something anyway. So he had to hurry up so Michael J. Pollard could do that. Michael was a very nice man. A little bit of a character. I mean that in the best sense. And of course, Sid was professionalism itself. Sid obviously has had a lot of experience in movies and TV, but also had done a lot of stage work. So he was an accomplished thespian, shall we say. So that was the rehearsal. And then the next time I saw all of them was when I drove up to, it was around California City anywhere where we shot it. It was up in the mountains there. In a place where you had to be careful that you didn't get lost because it was kind of off the main road, etc. And then I remember going on the set. I think I checked into the hotel first, brought my costume with me. And then I went out to this amazing set because the set for that first scene, you get a sense of it in the film, but you don't get a sense of how detailed that set was. There were incredible things, like the entire wall was covered with, of course, those newspaper clippings and so many other things. I mean, you could spend your entire time on that set just reading what they put up. The detail was incredible on the set of that scene. So at any rate, I think that lasted just like a day or so. And then I remember I spent the night at the hotel and drove back to town after that. And I thought that was probably pretty much it. It was nice that rubbing shoulders with Sid and a bunch of other people that I'd known. Rob was great about hiring actors. Not that they weren't good; they were all very good actors, but perhaps weren't as well known, except for Sid, Karen Black, Michael J. Pollard. Maybe the rest of us were all pretty not as well known, shall we say?
Right.
And so he was great about giving us a chance to get our foot in the door, which most studios, especially when it's an expensive production like that, they don't want to do that. They want, understandably, to hire names. But that was one refreshing thing there are many refreshing things about House of a Thousand Corpses, but that's one of the things I most remember. And then I will say, then later on, one of the suits decided that the film could be more violent, more bloody. And so I was called back in. We didn't go up to the mountains this time. It was I don't remember what studio lot it was, but I was called in. It was an area there in town, so I didn't have to drive very far. And I was called in to do the scene. If you remember in the scene, in the movie rather, I get half of my head shot out and I fall into frame. Yeah. And they spent quite a bit of time on the makeup on that. And my acting job on that day was simply to fall into frame on the right mark so they could get a good shot of it, which I think they did. Yeah.
How many takes did you get it in one take to fall right in the
No, that one took. There weren't a lot of takes, though. I mean, Rob was very specific about what he wanted. I was, focused and ready to go. I would say maybe less than 10. I would probably say like between 4 and 5, really.
So when you fall into frame, are you just falling on the floor, or are you...
What happened was I think I was on my knees. And then, somebody gave me the cue, and I fell into, just fell forward onto the side of my head that they needed to see the wound on. So that one wasn't technically very difficult at all. That's what I remember of it. And then obviously later on, all of us, the actors, kept expecting the film to come out, and then we kept hearing these rumors about the fact that Rob was having trouble with the studio. The studio thought it was too violent. It was right about that time, if you recall. So this must be about 99, 2000. I'm not sure. It was right about that time, though, that somebody went to Congress and complained that there was violence. The violence in movies had gotten to be too much. And Universal, who had given Rob carte blanche, they had asked for scenes to be reshot so that they were bloodier. Now they went the opposite direction. They were, I think, afraid of it. The House of a Thousand Corpses is a very intense film. And if even for horror fans, it's the plot is kind of out there, and then you have a lot of different people around it, different characters who seem to come in and out of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't have a strictly linear plot line, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So at any rate, what happened, as you probably well know, and other horror fans know, the studio decided to give Rob back the rights to the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I remember there being a big article about it in the LA Times. I had it at one point. I don't know if I still have it. And Rob had to shop the film around, and it took him a couple of years to find a distributor for it.
Mm-hmm. During that time, like, were you keeping like in touch with people and following what was going on with the movie, or did it kind of go out of your mind after a while?
It rather went out of my mind because I went and I did other things. I was also doing some stage work myself. In addition, I was teaching full time. I think I was teaching second grade at the time. So I had my hands filled with that. I just remember, did I see Chad or somebody somewhere that's when I heard the rumors that the film had been pushed back or been shelved for a while until Rob could find a distributor.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I heard about it, I think it was in the papers, but I'm trying. Maybe I saw Robert Muke someplace, and Robert and I knew each other from the set, even though I don't recall that we had any scenes together. But we knew each other from that, and I think some other casting director workshop or something. But I knew Robert well enough to go up and talk to him, and I think we were talking, and he told me about the difficulties that the film was having, and that's how I knew that Rob would have to find a different distributor. And eventually, what happened was, it didn't have the big the big opening that we all hoped it was going to. I said Halloween, I think, because it was supposed to open at some point around Halloween. Mm-hmm. And then that Halloween came and went, and we heard nothing about the film. We knew the film was done, but that it had difficulty finding the distributor. And as I recall, there was an opening of some kind, although I'm not saying I was offended. I don't recall that there was like a big company. You know, sometimes there's a big company meeting to go see the opening of the film. Mm-hmm. And that, as I recall, didn't happen. I went to go see it myself in a theater in the Beverly Hills, Hollywood area there. I went to see it on a Saturday afternoon. And I enjoyed it very much. I mean, well, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I was horrified by it, but I enjoyed it, you know.
Yeah. So that was the first time you saw the finished film?
Yes, that was the first time I saw the finished film. I will say, let me backtrack a little bit. After we finished filming, we had, of course, our wrap party, which was a lot of fun. It was right there on Lancashire Boulevard at one of the big restaurants there. And then after that, I remember that we were contacted that Rob, who wasn't married to Sheri at the time, they were engaged. Mm-hmm. He wanted to have a surprise party for Sheri, and so he invited us all to her surprise party. Mm-hmm. And I got there in what I thought was plenty of time, but of course I couldn't find parking, so I ended up being a little bit late. I think I got there just before Sheri came in, and we all got to surprise her, and she was overwhelmed. And that was another lovely evening. It was just so nice to see everybody again and dance and, you know, be off the set and talk about, you know, whatever's going on in our lives.
Yeah.
But I do recall that he invited us to her party. It was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And you know, that's Sheri's first movie, I believe. No, she might have did a movie before, but it's like her first movie that like big role, I would say. And
yeah,
I don't know if were you on set at all when she was acting?
Yes. I wasn't down there really when she was acting. I know she was on set on the days that I was there. I think because she had another scene or something that they were shooting. But I did get to meet her. She's a lovely person. She's not at all like what she appears in his movies, which is good. But I'd love to see her again. The last time I saw her, ironically, I think this must have been about 2005 or 2006, the both of them. Mm-hmm. I was working at the Tower Video, which sadly is no longer there, right there on Sunset Boulevard. If you remember where Tower was?
No, I'm from Massachusetts.
No?
So, yeah.
Okay, on Sunset Boulevard there, Tower Records. At any rate, I was working at the Video Classical store, and they came in one night, and one of the guys that worked there asked me to introduce him to them, and so I did. So I think that was the last time I saw Rob and Sheri. It's been a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cheap plug for us, actually. I had her on the show, I think 2007. As far as I know, I think it's the only podcast she ever came on, but she was the she was great. She was very funny, and it was a good time.
She's very personable.
Yeah.
As someone else, one of the other production people said at the time, and I don't remember who it was, and it was something bad. He just said she was so professional. If she had wanted to, she could have been a real diva on the set. She was not. Mm-hmm. She was there to learn. She said in interviews, I've read what she said about how much she enjoyed and how much she learned from working with Karen Black. Mm-hmm. I only got to meet Karen at the wrap party. Karen was not on set the day I was there, but I did get to meet her. I made a point of going out of my way and saying hello to her and telling her what a wonderful actor she is.
Yeah.
Sheri she was a delight to work with, delight to have on set. She was very encouraging, and I hopefully get to see her sometime again.
Yeah.
On a little different note, a couple of years later, remember when he was casting his first version of Halloween,
mm-hmm.
I hadn't heard from them or Rob in a couple of years, and I got a call from my agent saying, "Oh, they want you to come in and audition for this." Unfortunately, at the time, and I don't know why they did it this way, but they cast the movie, or at least those casting sessions, were over the winter or Christmas break, mm-hmm. and I was in Michigan at the time, visiting my father, mm-hmm. and I didn't have the money to run and switch my airline ticket to get back to LA in time. I called and said, here's the situation. I left a message. Could I please audition for you when I get back? Because it was just going to be a few more days. But as it turned out, apparently they got what they needed, and I didn't get to audition.
That's
oh well.
Yeah. So, but so it's like years before the movie actually comes out, and you're not necessarily paying attention to what's happening. So when it does come out, and what was that like? What was the reaction to the movie like? And it became a huge horror movie, one of the biggest like modern horror movies, I would say. So how was that like once the movie actually was released?
As I recall, the people who really liked Rob Zombie, who were into not only his music but also his brand of horror, really were very, very enthusiastic about the film. Mm-hmm. And then, predictably, the ones who were not into Rob or were into a different branch, I guess, in the horror genre. As I said, it's a little bit like a carnival ride, at least the first movie, House of a Thousand Corpses. Mm-hmm. It's a little different from the second movie, which involves some of the same characters, I know. But there, Rob took a different direction. Mm-hmm. But the first film is kind of like this crazy carnival horror ride that you're just going up and down and seeing all these crazy things and trying to ingest it and trying to make sense of all of it. And it's very powerful and overwhelming. I can understand, though, why some people would, even horror fans, might not like it, at least the first time. My sense is that one of the reasons it's become such a cult classic is people have gone back and watched it a number of times. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things where people remember lines from it and repeat them in everyday life, Uh-huh. I can't recall right offhand some of them, but I know I've heard some of them in at like the horror movie conventions and places like that.
Yeah.
So I think the critical response to it was mixed. Mm-hmm. Among the critics who were expecting, I think, a much more linear. I don't know exactly what they were expecting. They knew it was going to be violent. Mm-hmm. But the people who loved Rob and supported his work really liked it, and I think they were the ones who helped make it a cult classic. Mm-hmm. But the reason it became a cult classic, I think, a couple of years, or started to become after that, was because people who had seen it maybe one time and didn't like it, sometimes you show a movie like that at parties and people start to pick it up from there. It's kind of a little bit like, although not exactly the same by any means, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which, I remember when I first saw that, I wasn't horrified. I just didn't know quite what to make of it. I was in high school at the time. Uh-huh. That'll date me. But I know that film is one that has picked up a huge cult following, and I think perhaps not in the same way, but House of a Thousand Corpses has a similar sort of cult following to it.
Yeah. I'll be honest, even myself, when I first saw the movie, I wasn't really that into it. It was after repeat viewings that I liked it more, because
Yes.
I always liked the beginning with Captain Spaulding, Sid Haig's character. I always thought that was great, and then it kind of progressively gets weirder and weirder. It's kind of like falling into madness, because then it's totally crazy by the end when they're underground, and so it was kind of this, like you said, overwhelming and daunting experience. But then as you watch it again and kind of know what you're in for, I appreciate the movie a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned the underground stuff. When I went back to shoot that part that I told you that was where they shot my, with my head getting blown off in frame. While they were at, we were having, I think, dinner. And we were having dinner right next to where the set for the underground stuff was. And there was some time before we resumed shooting. So I took it upon myself to kind of start not crawling around, but walking around. I got totally freaked out. that set for the underground terrain was creepy.
Uh-huh.
And even though there were people within earshot, I was like, I've got to get out of here. So it was a very, and again, the detail in the set was incredible because it was all built. We weren't really next to an underground cave. That was all built. And the people who created that, hats off to them. I mean, they did a fantastic job.
Mm-hmm. And from convention stuff, I think Captain Spaulding has really become, an iconic horror character from modern times. I mean, you even see people with tattoos of Captain Spaulding and shirts, and that's pretty wild.
Yeah. He's appeared at so many different conventions and stuff.
Yeah.
He's very affable, very sharp, quick guy. And I think that Captain Spaulding is, within the last, 20, 25 years, has become one of those few characters from the horror genre that, as you say, has become a very famous character.
Yeah. That's something I talked about on the show because, of course, Universal monsters, they're iconic. And then you had the slashers like Jason and Freddy. And then for a long time, I don't think there was really like a set of, new modern, like, iconic characters. But I would put Captain Spaulding in that. For him and
it's almost like he's like the 21st century version of the Frankenstein monster. It's not the same character, of course, but it's like that kind of recognition of that character. People who haven't even seen House of a Thousand Corpses, they snap their fingers and go, "Oh, Captain Spaulding,"
Yeah. And it's actually Sid was our first guest ever on the show, our first show in 2006. So. Huge fan of Sid Haig, and it's now he had a great career even before this, but it wasn't until a lot later in his career where he had like his defining role, and I think that's that's pretty great for anyone to think, if I stick to something I love, eventually you could, even later on, you could, get the success. I don't want to even say success because he was successful, but get the role that like he's known for.
Well, I think I was reading about Sid someplace, maybe on IMDb or something. He had actually, correct me if I'm wrong, he had actually retired from acting and was still directing and doing some stuff on some stage work when this came out, and, the rest is movie history. But, yes, I mean, it took, all that time and experience, because, Sid was known for playing the big, scary, bald guy in a lot of different things. I remember him in Heart to Heart. I remember him in Dino Woman or something. I told him about that. He goes, "Oh yes, Of course, these were shows that were all shot years before we did House of a Thousand Corpses. But it was House of a Thousand Corpses that put him on the map more as a more recognizable star.
Yeah, and you mentioned Michael Pollard. I heard from other people that you mentioned he was a character, but do you know if him and Rob Zombie got along? Because I've had people on the show that said there was some kind of problems between the two during that scene.
I don't recall, I didn't hear any fighting or anything like that. I do remember that Rob would sometimes want to rehearse something, and Michael was like, "Oh, no, come on, let's just shoot it," or whatever. He seemed to always want to be ready to leave set. Michael and I, actually, there was an extra scene that Michael and I shot together that was not included in the film, and I can understand why, because it really wouldn't have. There was tension building at that point, and if Rob had cut away to the scene that Michael and I shot, it would not have worked. The scene would not at the beginning would not have worked as well. What happened was I followed Michael's character to the restroom or something. So I got something. I don't remember exactly. There was some little business that we were supposed to do, and then we came back in, and that's when I got shot. I think it was that I was supposed to go get Michael out of, forgive me, the shitter, as it were. And as it turned out, he ended up dominating me. You know, here I am at 6'5", and Michael is what, I don't know, 5-something. And the scene was actually very funny. But I think that's the reason probably that Rob cut it, because it had the wrong tone for what he was trying to do and accomplish in that scene.
Yeah.
But I mean, Michael was very pleasant to me. I don't recall there being any, as I say, arguments. I think Rob may have been, and I'm not putting words in his mouth. I'm just recalling from what happened. You know, like I say, Michael just seemed less inclined to rehearse and do some different things that we had planned. So I guess you could say that. I don't know to what degree that irritated Rob.
Now, all the little Dick Wick dialogue that was all in the script. That
was in the script, yes.
And
just make you sick. Yeah, that was all in the script.
And when you were putting together the wardrobe, was that when you found the monkey mask, or was that in the script at all, or?
The masks, they were supposed to be covered with, their faces were supposed to be covered with the masks.
But it didn't say
the
specifically.
Masks, I don't think those specific ones were brought out to the set, and Rob looked them over, and then we tried them on, and Rob picked the ones that he wanted. I don't recall that they were there when we did the initial costuming.
I always liked yours because it doesn't cover your whole face, which I think is funny for a mask where you want to, you know.
And the other thing that's kind of weird is, like, at the time I sported a shaved head. And, you know, for the kind of time period in which the film is set, you know, there were guys with that MPB, that male pattern baldness fringe around their sides of their head.
Right.
But most men didn't sport shaved heads at that time. So that was a little unusual. And I asked Rob, I said, do you want me to grow my hair out for this? He goes, oh, no, I like it. So I kept it. And so you hear here's this big bald head with this little mask on it. I remember thinking it was funny too.
Yeah, it's just very peculiar, and it really adds a lot of charm to the character. And
there was a scene that Chad and I shot where we were coming up to the restaurant. We were talking about what we were going to do, and I think I brought in my actual cousin Mary Grace, that she was the one who gave us the masks or something. And again, I think that was cut. Again, because it didn't really work with the rest of the scene, and I don't think it's ever been like on a DVD extra sort of thing. So maybe the footage just didn't work, or maybe the lighting was wrong or something.
Yeah.
But I do remember there were a couple of other scenes that we shot that weren't in the actual film.
And then,
Pardon me.
No problem. And then to contrast with the small monkey mask, and Irwin Keyes comes in with this great big giant. Head on, which is pretty sweet. Then Irwin passed away not too long ago. Do you have any memories of Irwin?
My memories of Irwin are all wonderful. He was a lovely man on set. I didn't know him that well at the time I introduced myself to him, because of course I recognized him from the Jeffersons and many other things that he'd done. He was very unpretentious, just a working actor like the rest of us. I would tell you, I got to know Irwin better at the conventions, especially the one we went to in Atlanta back in 2000. Was it 2011? I think so. Maybe it was 2013. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was the first time I'd been back to Atlanta. Atlanta is where I had traveled from when I came out to L.A. I taught there for 8 years before I came out to L.A. So I hadn't been out there for about 15 years. And Irwin was on the flight with us. He was a very practical man, very generous man, very friendly with people. I was not at all surprised about the success he had, excuse me, of people coming up to him and wanting his picture and wanting to get to know him, because he was a very genial man, very easy to talk to. Sorry. one of the things I remember that he did specifically was we were talking about, people coming up and buying pictures and all that stuff. He goes, "Oh, I never charge anybody who's been in the U.S. military."
Oh.
And I said, "Oh, I didn't know that." And he goes, "No, they come up to me. If they tell me they're in the military, then, I won't charge them for the picture." Mm-hmm. And I felt guilty because about a half hour earlier, I'd had, I think, a Marine couple or something come up, and of course I charged them because I hadn't really thought about it. But I know from that moment on, there was another Army couple that came up after that. I didn't charge them. So I kind of followed Irwin's example on that.
Yeah.
I miss Irwin. I didn't know him really well, mm-hmm. but he was one of those few really genial, kind people. They do exist in show business. They really do. There are some good people in show business, mm-hmm. And he was one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was. I only met him a couple times, and he was extremely nice to me. And had him on the show and stuff. He's a really nice guy. So, yeah, mm-hmm. He was just a lovely person, a great human being. Yeah. Now, do you remember what was specifically written on the paper clippings that were all over the wall?
Not specifically. I remember that they were all stories about. They were drawn from those magazines, like those magazines about ape woman, 8 feet long, found.
Right. Okay. Like
that baby found.
Kind of stuff.
It was those type of sensational stories, like almost like National Enquirer stories, but without the celebrity. Right. It was all the more salacious stuff, the more grotesque stuff that sometimes gets published in those.
It was like the
magazines.
Weekly World News kind of stuff, I think.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but nothing like real news. This is what I mean about the detail. I mean, they could have done that, and no one would have been the wiser, I think, because as I recall from seeing the film, you do see it, but it doesn't dwell on that for very long, mm-hmm. unless you put it on, you freeze the disc or the tape or whatever. Sure. So this is what I mean by the detail that they employed mm-hmm. to capture the heart of the film.
Mm-hmm. Do you think something like that, even if when you're watching the movie you might not know all, you won't see like all those details, but all of that adds up to something and it gives it more of a real feel to it because anyone where someone lives, there's all little details. There's little things everywhere. So if you see where it looks like it's like a real place, a lived-in place, there, even if like you don't think about it, it does add something to it while you're watching it.
Yes, they really did it. I mean, it did capture the atmosphere for us. Mm. Because I remember going up to that set and going like, "Oh my God, do they really serve food here? Is this, in other words, is this an old restaurant?" Right. And it wasn't. Mm-hmm. It was just built for the occasion of the movie. Mm-hmm. But it helped kind of. Rob has this not a theme, but he tends to. How do I say it? I don't necessarily a nice thing. He likes to dwell on like white trash folk. Yeah. You know this from like Halloween, from the second film, and also from the Halloween movies. Mm-hmm. So the things that they're stereotypically interested in. Mm-hmm. Like I say, the salacious details that were in the newspaper writings, the language that is used, the attitudes of so many of the characters, and this creation of the set created an atmosphere that all that was able to blossom in and bring it out on camera. Mm-hmm. So, yes, to answer your question directly, I think that really did enhance our acting experience and made it more real for all of us.
Mm-hmm. And those kind of type of characters are also in his latest movie, 31. What are your thoughts on Rob Zombie's movies? Have you watched them, and do you think he's progressed as a movie maker?
Yes, I mean, House of a Thousand Corpses is kind of like in of its own sort of thing, because, like I say, it's more like a carnival ride than it is a traditional horror movie. Yes, there are traditional horror movie elements in it, but they're all kind of squeezed in. And there's a different kind of horror. There's like zombies, there's monsters and stuff like that, for instance, which are not in the second film.
The Devil's Rejects.
Yeah, The Devil's Rejects, where that's a film that's horrifying in a completely different way. Mm-hmm. Because once again, we're surrounded by people who are kind of white trashy. But at the same time, the events, or most of the events that happen, it could really happen. Whereas a lot of the events in House of 1,000 Corpses, I suppose, could happen in a weird sort of Kafka-esque, Poe-ish kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
But Devil's Rejects, it's horrifying because a lot of those things could really happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Halloween, both the first one and the sequel, again, he tends to focus on people in lower economic circumstances who are at the height of extremis in terms of dealing with what they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I have not seen, unfortunately,
Lords of Salem.
Lords of Salem. Yes. Now I haven't seen that, so I can't comment on it. But I know the people I've spoken to have said it's got more in common with House of 1,000 Corpses. But at the same time, it has a sort of reality to it that once you enter it is very believable.
Mm-hmm. I really like it. I think it's his most underrated movie because I know a lot of Rob Zombie movie fans didn't like it because it is a lot different, I think, than his other movies. It doesn't have a lot of the same themes, a little different. It's a little slower paced, kind of like a 70s movie. But I like that about it. I like that it's totally different, and I think it's one of his best movies.
Well, again, it deals with the occult.
Mm-hmm.
That has its roots in a lot of what Rob does on his stage show, but also that is in many ways the first film, House of 1,000 Corpses, has a lot of dealings with the occult. Like I said, and monsters and stuff like that. That the other three films after that generally steer clear of. I mean, I know Halloween has its occult moments too,
mm-hmm.
but at the same time, it's not the same thing as Corpses and the last film that you mentioned. I haven't heard of 31, so I'm going to have to either go see that or read up on it.
Yeah, it came out last year. Had a that's a movie he did with crowdfunding because he couldn't get people to back it, but so it was crowdfunded by the fans. Came out last Halloween, and it's out there now. I think you can get on DVD, Blu-ray, and everything.
Okay. But, well, I'll definitely look it up.
Yeah. What kind of movies do you watch normally? Are you into horror movies?
I am into horror movies.
Uh-huh.
I was going to say it's kind of stupid for me to say. I really like the good. Well, everybody likes good horror films, but there are some people who really enjoy campy horror films,
sure.
Or and I certainly have. I certainly enjoy some of those myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like one of the ones I saw a couple years ago, is The Conjuring.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
No, about the doll that was haunted, and then the family goes to ask the couple.
Yeah, that's The Conjuring. Yeah, that's The Conjuring, and then the doll was the Annabelle doll, but the movie's The Conjuring.
Yeah, and I haven't seen that, but I did see The Conjuring. One of the reasons I really liked The Conjuring is that with a very little gore in it,
mm-hmm.
that film was terrifying. I mean, it's all in what you don't see and what you think is there, and then suddenly it springs out at you with no warning, or you think that you know when it's coming, and it's also very well acted. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to think of some of the this is terrible. The films, where they think there's a ghost in the house, so they put up the video system to record it all.
Right.
Do you know that?
I know exactly
that
what
genre.
Mean. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of recent ones like that. Insidious.
Yeah,
is one, and I'm bad with movies. I'm a horror host here. I should know these names.
Terrible. I mean, I should know some of these titles. As soon as I saw it, I'd be like, oh, that's what I meant. I remember the third one of that series was kind of weak until the last 25, 30 minutes, where it just became heart-poundingly suspenseful.
Mm-hmm.
So it was worth you have to wait for the last half hour for the final setup, mm-hmm. the final showdown. But that was kind of worth it. Classic ones. I mean, this is not a horror movie, really.
Mm-hmm.
A thriller. Jaws, for example.
I love Jaws, yeah.
I remember. No, this is going to date me. I remember seeing that when I was, I don't know, 10 or something, 10 or 11 or something. I don't know. My mother didn't want me to go see it because she thought it would scare me, and she was right. a friend of mine pointed out recently. He said, "David, you know that's really a slasher film. But just the shark is the slasher." And I was like, "He's got a point."
I think that's more part 2. I've always said part 2 is really like a slasher movie with the shark, but part 1 there's really not too many shark attacks. For me, the original Jaws is more about the 3 male characters and them bonding and
right. And you know, honestly, I think the creepiest part of that film is Quint's monologue about being on the USS Indianapolis, which is just chilling.
Yeah.
And Robert Shaw was brilliant in that. The opening 3 minutes, I mean, obviously you know it's the shark attacking Chrissy, but as Steven Spielberg has said in one of his documentaries, if I had shown the shark, yeah, you would have seen it and there would have been a big opening, but there would have been nothing primal about it. Whereas with this, yes, you know it's the shark, but it's just horrifying because there's nothing that anybody could have done to help her, and it's a heart-stopping opening 3 or 4 minutes, you know, of that film.
Yeah, where I am. They filmed Jaws not far from where I am. I'm on Cape Cod, and they filmed it on the islands next to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I think they have a Jaws, some type of, not a convention. Well, maybe it's a convention every year on, it's one of the islands, Martha's Vineyard, I think. Yeah,
I saw recently someone posted on July 1st, R.I.P. Chrissy Watkins. Kind of macabre, but there you are.
Yeah. But yeah, every 4th of July here, where they always show Jaws somewhere on the big screen, which is great to see the movies on the big screen.
And there's this new thing that, well, not new thing, I guess it's within the last 5 or 10 years, where people watch it, but you watch it like, like while you're swimming.
Yeah, like on little not rafts, but like little inflatable things. You like
yes, and you watch the film while you're out there doing that.
Yeah,
that must be really creepy.
Yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun. I know here, we're lucky. There's a few. Every weekend they show midnight movies at Coolidge, and my friend Annabelle and I go there a lot. And it's great to see the movies on the big screen, and it's cool to see them at midnight. But during the summer, they do some stuff outside. And lately, every Friday the 13th, they'll show Friday the 13th movies out in the woods, by a cabin, by a lake. And it's just a fun experience. And they'll have a guy dressed as Jason.
I can imagine. And I'll bet you there's somebody out there like tapping people on the shoulder and scaring them while they're watching the movie.
Right. Yeah, I think the last one was it was very cold out, I remember, but it was still a fun time. But you know, like, how did you get into acting? Were you always a movie fan?
It's funny how I got into acting. This is just one of those weird stories. When I think it was in 3rd grade. I always liked acting and movies, and I remember someone had explained to me when I was younger. I remember saying to someone, "How do they remember all those lines from the beginning of the story to the end?" And they said, "Oh, David, you don't think that they performed it all at one time?" And I said, "Well, of course, because I didn't know."
Right.
And they had explained to me that they did it in shorter takes. And I was like, "Oh, But I always liked the storytelling of movies. And then in 3rd grade, I was cast as the mighty germ in this crazy play called Piffle. It's only a sniffle. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And it was at St. Luke's Catholic School at the time. And I got so much acclaim for being the mighty germ, the scary germ, or whatever. And I realized that, wait a second, I'm up here in front of all these people, and they like me. And I liked playing other people. I think that's why a lot of actors get into acting. It's kind of a cliche that there's a part of ourselves that we don't like, so it's fun to go on and take other people's skin where you could be someone else. And then it just kind of built from there. I actually didn't do my first film work, though, until I was in Atlanta, Georgia, teaching, where I started getting into film and television. I actually got out of acting for about 5 years. And then when I got back into it, I couldn't let it go. I mean, there were friends I knew who were getting agents and were doing television commercials and films, and I really wanted to do that. And then when I was about, 30 or 31, I decided, my father thought I was crazy, of course, and he was probably right, but I really wanted to give acting a shot. And I really wanted to go out to L.A. and try it. So I had tenure at the Atlanta Public School System, but I gave it up. And I drove out to L.A. in 1997. And, from there on, I just, like I say, when I first got into corpses, I'd only been in L.A. for about a year, maybe a year and a half. When and the way that I knew Frank and Pembroke was because I'd taken one of their casting director workshops. And Dean remembered me from that and then helped get me cast in House of a Thousand Corpses. So I've kind of gone on the roundabout way. I mean, I did a lot of things that most young actors do. I did a lot of musical theater, classical work, plays. Anywhere I could get experience to act, I would do. When I went out to L.A., one of the things I find, and I advise other actors on this too, you've got to know what it is about you that will make you bankable to someone else. I mean, I know as actors we like to say, "Oh, I can play anything," but maybe we can in our minds or in the shower. But when people are casting, I mean, there is a lot of stereotyping and typecasting. But I didn't care about that because that typecasting helped get me roles. I wish that I had been able to be on a long-time series and had a major role on that? Sure. I did get to be on How Arrested Development for several episodes. That was a lot of fun. And I did a number of other TV sitcoms and dramas and movies. But I didn't, there are a small number of actors who managed to get on series that run a long time. I wasn't one of those, but I'm very happy for the experiences that I had. Very grateful for them.
Hills of Eyes Part 2. And I was watching a video, and Michael Smith, who was in Hills of Eyes, he said when he read the script, he wanted to play the role of Hansel, which you got, because he thought it was the best character in the movie. He went on to play Hades. But so, what did you think of the Hansel character when you read the script?
Well, let me back up just 1 year.
Sure. I
had gotten a callback for the first film for one of the mutants in that, and I didn't get that. And then the next year, out of the blue, again, this is what happens in the acting business so much. A friend of mine let me know via email that he had seen a casting notice for The Hills of Eyes 2, and there might be some parts in me for that. So I knew the casting director, not real well, but I knew of him, and auditioned for him several times. And that same day, I took my headshot down and put it in his mailbox. I didn't even see him. I just put it in his box. And a day or so later, I got a call to come in and audition. Well, then I got a call back for that. And then after that, I didn't hear anything. I figured, okay, well, it was 3 and 4 weeks went by. I figured, oh, well, I didn't get that one. Out of the blue on a Saturday morning, I got a phone call from the casting director asking if I was still available and could I do the film. And I, of course, said yes. The character itself, I didn't get to read the whole script until I had signed on the line, as it were. So I didn't really know where they were going with that character. I had been told he was kind of like a character in the other film where he was nicer than the other ones. And certainly in the film, you see I'm the only one that has any kind of shred of human decency and dignity left. Reportedly, now I don't know how accurate this is. Originally, it was supposed to be that I saved them all at the end and then led them into this big room where there were a bunch of mutants. We all leaped on them and ate them up, and that was the end of the film. But somebody decided that was too much. So they changed my character to someone who was much more sympathetic. And on the DVD, there is the original ending of the film. After they emerge from the cave at the end, the DVD shows my character munching on the arm of one of the other characters that was killed earlier in the film and saying, "Run away, run away," And that was the original ending of the film. And I do recall that when I saw the film, that was the film that everybody got together to see the film for the first time. And I remember looking for that part at the end, and it wasn't there. And I was disappointed, to say the least. But, it wasn't my film. So I'm glad that they put it on the DVD, though. I did enjoy playing Hansel. In some ways, he has a lot similar to Lenny in Of Mice and Men. I love being underneath the makeup. I mean, the first time they put that makeup on me, after I'd gone in for in L.A., I went over to the studio there that they did it, and they made a cast of my head, where they cover your face and your head completely with this foam stuff
Right.
that they used to carve your makeup out of.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got to Morocco, the first time it took them about 2.5 hours to put all the makeup on.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end, they put it on enough that it took them like an hour and a half.
Wow.
But I loved being under all that makeup because you can really be somebody else because no one can recognize you, or very few people.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one day I was in full makeup, and they asked me to take pictures with some of the King of Morocco's guardsmen or something like that. They were like, they don't even know who I am. They just see me as being this monster, you know? I'm not David Reynolds anymore. I'm Hansel.
Yeah. Well, the first time you see yourself in the full costume and full makeup, what goes through your mind? And do you start to, I'm sure you already have ideas how you're going to play the character, but once you see yourself as the character, does that change how, you think you're going to talk and move?
Yes, especially when it comes to talking and moving around, because in that makeup, I didn't have as much peripheral vision as I had without the makeup. Mm-hmm. So I had to be careful where I walked, but it helped create the walk for me. It helped make me just a totally different person and acting through the makeup. That's the challenge of working with prosthetics. Mm-hmm. You have to be able, and Michael Bailey Smith knows this. You have to be able to create the character with all that makeup on. You have to use the makeup to create the character, but you can't let the makeup just be in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And there were a number of great makeup jobs in that film. Michael's was great. Derek
Mears.
Smith, what's his name? Derek Mears. Mm-hmm. That wonderful makeup they had on him, that took him, I want to say 3 hours, because they did almost his whole body. So it took even longer for him to transform himself into that character. Mm-hmm. But I would do another prosthetic film in a minute. Some people don't like prosthetic,
Yeah.
But I would do it again in a minute.
Michael had said on a video I saw that the specific prosthetics that they used on that movie was easier to like move your face in. So he said it was better, to show emotion through. Where I guess sometimes it doesn't really move; it just kind of sits there.
Yeah, I mean that depends. I think that they learned from the first film how to do that even better, because I certainly don't recall that I had a lot of trouble moving around. I had an eye that they used in most shots, mm-hmm. Which made one eye, I couldn't use the one eye. I could only see out of the one eye, and they had the plastic eye or the glass eye in the other one. But again, that helped create the character for me because my character had those limitations. Mm-hmm.
When you said you were disappointed not to see the original ending, I assume, because it's a good scene for you, but do you think the movie worked better with that ending, or do you think they made the right choice in changing the ending?
I think the original ending is creepier. Mm-hmm. Maybe at that point they didn't want to do that. I don't know what the producers, what their thought on it was. I know that the director, Martin, I can see his face right in front of me, but I can't remember. It's a German last name.
Wise?
Yes, Martin Weitz. Nice. I always call him Martin Weitz instead of Weitz because I speak German, so right. I was able to talk with him a little bit in German. But anyway, I'm not, as I recall, and maybe you shouldn't quote me on this, I don't recall that he was happy with some of the things that were in the film. Mm. There was conflict between Martin and the producer about how that was all supposed to come about. Mm-hmm. I do remember that being there. I didn't see any of it really myself, but I know some of the other actors experienced some of the tension between Martin and the producers of the film.
Mm-hmm. Now, I saw a video with you too, and you mentioned that Wes Craven came out for a day or so, maybe a week, whatever it was, and he wrote some of the script and had some input. Do you remember exactly anything that he worked on when he came out?
I do remember the script changes. I don't think they affected my character. I do remember that when we went back once we'd flown back to the United States about a month or so later, I was asked to come in and put the makeup on again, and they were going to shoot some scenes at one of the studios there. Mm-hmm. And there was a short scene I had actually with Michael Bailey Smith's character that was cut. I think he was trying to establish the relationship between the mutants, which wasn't clear in the film. As it turns out, I don't think it even made the DVD. So they must have decided it didn't work. But I think his main concern about the film, he wanted the film to be one way, and what that way was, I wasn't sure. And Martin wanted a different look for it or something. But I do know that there were some rewrites right there at the end.
Do you remember that scene that you filmed with Hades with Michael Bailey Smith's character?
Yes.
Like
do I remember it?
Yeah. Do you remember what was supposed to? He said to show the connection between was it like more that he's more dominant?
I remember
to you,
calling him Papa Hades, and I think what they wanted to show was that Michael's character was the one that dominated all of us.
Right.
And as I recall, I went in and said something to him about not being able to find the people or something. He told me to get the hell out or something. I mean, it was a very brief scene. It wasn't a scene, though, that really cleared anything up, as I recall, which is probably why it's not in the film.
Yeah. So, when you said you couldn't see out of the one eye, now, are you in actual caves, or is that a set? And, in the desert and stuff, was it hard to move around? Yeah.
Yeah, there were exteriors filmed. In fact, I remember the first couple of days that I shot, we filmed the exteriors, which were out in the Moroccan desert. And they would send out this gentleman who was hired to clear the area of poisonous snakes and scorpions that would have been in the way, which is fascinating in and of itself. He apparently was one of those children. They allow this, I guess, over in Morocco. When a baby is born, they allow the baby to be bitten by a snake or a scorpion. If the baby dies, the baby dies. But if the baby doesn't die, then forever afterward, for the rest of his life, that person cannot be. A cobra could bite him, and it wouldn't have any it wouldn't make any effect on him.
Right.
So these particular gentlemen, or I suppose there's some ladies too, are hired by the studios to film out there to go out and clear the set of these. And they would pick the scorpions and the snakes up literally without any gloves on.
Wow.
So to answer your question directly, we did film a number of things on the exteriors outside of the desert, but a lot of the cave stuff, that was all shot inside at one of the studios.
That's a movie in itself, being bit by a scorpion or something. As a baby.
Again, the set detail was incredible. I mean, the scene, if you remember at the end of House of Thousand Corpses, where they come across the dynamite,
right?
That was all shot in a studio. All that cave work was all just a set design. It was not really an actual cave.
So, how hot was it? Because you have all the makeup on and you're out in the desert.
I didn't find it that bad. I was kept in the shade most of the time. I remember one of the producers, Marianne, said, "Make sure you stay in the shade, David. I don't want you passing out from the heat." And actually, it wasn't that bad. I thought it was going to be a lot worse myself, but it wasn't nearly as exhausting as I thought it would be. Let me take that back. I did find at the end of a shooting day, I was really exhausted from being out in the heat and doing all the things that we had to do. But I didn't find that it was as blazingly hot for me. I know for some of the other actors, ironically, the actors who didn't wear the makeup, that some of those days were gruelingly difficult because it was so hot.
Did you ever think of, what happens to Hansel, like after the movie?
Well, you never see him after that scene. He runs away. I run away before the explosion goes off, and I think I just went back into the mountain someplace. If you see, like I say, the original ending, you know that Hansel has his darker side too, because he's there munching on one of their commander's arms at the end of the film. In fact, one of my photos that I sometimes sign and give to people at conventions is that shot. So I think that Hansel is still out there. Why not?
Yeah. Now, I know for a while there was always talks that there might be a third movie. Did you think at the time there would be a third one?
I had heard from a number of people, from a number of sources, that there wouldn't be one, and then I heard vaguely from someone that there would be one, but it wouldn't have anything to do with my character. So at that point, I lost interest.
Right. I don't blame you. But had you ever seen the original Hills Have Eyes?
The remake of the original, or the original?
The original, the Wes Craven one.
Wes Craven. Yes, I have seen it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it was horrifying. I can imagine for the time that it was created, it was more horrifying than it is now. I mean, the remake actually went even farther than that first one did. But the first one has, in some ways, a simplicity that is all the more horrifying, even without all the additional the special effects that they used for the second, the remake of it. And then I've also seen the first Hills of Eyes 2, which is very different in the plot than the one that we did.
Yeah. And
with Michael Berryman.
Who I heard.
I remember enjoying it, but I didn't think it was particularly remarkable.
No, it's not too great. I actually think that's one remake that's good though. I mean, there's so many remakes, and some of them I don't think are really even necessary. But the Hills Have Eyes remake I thought was one of the better ones. Yes,
I can say this now because it's 10 years ago that the film was released.
Right.
I enjoyed doing Hills of Ice 2 very much. I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it. Mm-hmm. Of the two, in terms of artistic quality, I think the first one, the Hills of Ice, the remake one, was better than the one we did. I think it was better scripted. There were more conflicts between the characters that made it more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say I was gonna say this, but I liked the first one a lot better too. So.
Yeah, I don't blame you. No, I'm not. I think that, maybe because I'm trying to remember if there were fewer mutants, but they were more specific. I mean, Michael Bailey Smith's character in that, it's not only terrifying, but he's the main bad guy. So in this film, there were a number of them, and we don't even actually see many of them until like 2/3 of the way through the film. Mm-hmm. I will say I think my character is the first one that's seen out in the open. It's within the first 10 minutes of the film. And then you don't see any more mutants until about another hour into the film.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think the first one is overall a better film.
Yeah, and I think the first one captured the idea of the original movie, where it was a family, kind of from the suburbs or whatever, who were made to become violent in this new in where they are. So you have the contrast of you had two different types of families, and they both had their own kind of family values, even if one's very weird. But they're forced to defend their family, become violent, and I think that's lost in the second one because you have it's about the military as opposed to a family unit. But I guess you couldn't do the same thing again either.
I wonder to what extent that was influenced by the events that were going on in the world at the time. Mm-hmm. How much of that is true or not, I don't know. Was there a little bit of an agenda in there? I've heard there was. I can see some people saying why they think that. I don't think that was the overwhelming drive in the film. Some of the details, I think that would have been easy to get right. I mean, I remember Michael Bailey Smith was also at one point in the Marines or something, and he pulled me aside one day. He goes, "I don't know why these guys have all their long hair. They should have their heads shorn into high and tight." Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I guess they didn't care about that kind of realism, Yeah. And the other thing is that because there were a number of characters in the second film, there wasn't time to develop any of them specifically. They were all rather generic characters.
Yeah, and then you don't care about them as much.
I'm sorry.
I was just saying. Then you go on. I'm sorry. I was just saying, then you don't care about what happened. You're not invested in the character if you don't have time to know them. In the first movie,
right.
When one of the family members gets killed, it's shocking because you've had time to be invested, in their well-being.
Yes. You really get a sense with that family that you start to really care about that family and what happens to them. And it's almost like they are vicariously taking your place. It's like almost like you're one of the family members. Whereas this one, they were all good actors. I'm not blaming the actors. but because there were a number of them, it became like a kind of 10 little Indians. Who's going to get picked off next?
Yeah.
And in what kind of gory fashion are they going to get picked off?
Mm-hmm. Then it was more of a typical slasher kind of movie. Is the first one's a more original, different kind of a movie.
Yeah,
it's very brutal and everything, but yeah. But I still enjoy it though. I like the honestly I like your character a lot, not just because you're here, but it's one of the mutants that has personality and some humanity, and there's more to it than just he's just a mutant.
There originally was a little bit more footage of me when I was in the cave, and I was showing them around my cave and what kind of things I had in my cave, and that was all cut. And I understand maybe for pacing or whatever that they cut that, but I kind of wish it had been on the DVD. I think it rounded the character out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And I read that Michael Berryman was going to be part of the movie at some point. Did you ever hear about that?
I vaguely recall someone saying something about that, but as far as I know, certainly he was never over in Morocco when I was there.
Right.
I don't recall him shooting anything for it, so something must have happened along the way.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you're in a movie and you get to be, in a totally different location, Morocco, do you get time to spend in the area and see things or eat interesting food or anything? Yeah,
the first day I got there, I was supposed to not shoot for a couple of days to kind of get me ready for the area, but as it turned out, I went to bed the night, after being on planes for 36 hours. So I was waking out of a sound sleep the next morning, and they said, "Hey, do you think that you could be on set today?" And of course I said, "Yes, that's what my job, that's what I'm here for." So I went to work right away. And then after that, see, originally what happened was they were going to have me fly into Morocco for a week or so, then fly back to the U.S. Because it was like a 4 or 5 week lapse between when they would need to shoot my other scene. And then I was going to fly back to Morocco. But I decided just to stay in Morocco because I figured, how many times do you get to go to Morocco?
Right.
So I actually was in Morocco for 7 weeks for that film, shot a week at the beginning and then about 7 or 8 days at the end of that. So in between, I had a lot of time. My plan originally was that I would go over to Egypt and visit and all that stuff. But as it turned out, logistically, that was going to be too difficult. So I had a forced vacation. I'm one of those people that doesn't vacation very often. Pardon me. And it forced me to just relax. And that's really what I needed at that point in my life. So when we finally got back into doing my scenes, I was raring to go. However, like I said, I got to be in Morocco for 7 weeks for that film. It's funny when you're on set with a group of people for that long. There's a family that developed. Sorry.
No problem.
And when the glue that holds you together, that experience is dissipated or is gone, then you tend to lose track of so many people. I mean, I would see some of the actors at auditions or other movies or casually around town. I remember the one young man that he was one of the soldiers. I was working at some variety store or something at the time, and I happened to be sitting in my car eating my lunch, and this young man, good-looking young man, was going down the street on a skateboard, and I happened to look out and said, "Oh my God, it's you!" And he was the guy from Hills of Ice 2, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And then I will say one thing I regret is that I became very close with the people who were doing the makeup in that film. I would have dinner with them. We'd do a lot of things together, have a lot of fun. And again, once that experience was over, it has been 10 years since I've seen any of them. Mm-hmm. And I do regret that. Mm-hmm. Because, they were going on to the next film in the next country, New Zealand, Australia, Europe, so I didn't get to see them. I just never got to see them again.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you started doing the conventions, and was that the first time you saw a lot of the people again from House of a Thousand Corpses?
Yes, I mean that I hadn't seen Michael Bailey Smith in a while. Michael and I have known each other. We were in some acting classes together when I first got to L.A. I think he'd been in L.A. for a while already. Mm-hmm. But Michael and I did a couple of acting classes together, so we knew each other from that. And we'd seen each other. I mean, we're big bald guys, so we saw each other see each other at different auditions.
Right.
And I knew Derek, kind of the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I'd seen them. I had not seen Irwin in quite a while. I hadn't seen any of the House of a Thousand Corpses people in a while when I did the Atlanta convention. Mm-hmm. So that was really great to see these people that, you did that film with, 10 years previously or something, and there they were.
Mm-hmm. Just the conventions themselves, was it something you enjoyed, and were they different than you had expected?
No, I enjoy the conventions very much. I do another one in a heartbeat. I just love meeting the fans. You meet as many quirky fans as you do, quote unquote, normal fans. Right, most of the people are just lovely, especially in Atlanta. There is truth to that maxim about Southern hospitality. I remember when I got off the plane in Atlanta, there are people that ask you like, "Hi, how are you?" It's so nice to have you, and like people I've never seen before in my life. Being so friendly. I'm not saying that there aren't friendly people in LA. Certainly there are, but people in LA tend to be a little bit more guarded and cautious when getting to know people for the first time. So it was nice meeting the fans there. There were some strange ones along the way. Trying to think of any one specific one. There was one gentleman who asked me at the first convention I went to, which was in Atlanta. That was the one that was Chiller. That was over in New Jersey.
Okay.
And New Jersey. And he came up to me. We were talking for a little while, and he goes, "Well, how do you get away with all those murders?" I said, "What?" I mean, I didn't know what he was talking about. I thought he was joking. I said, "How do you get away with all those murders?" And I thought, I said, "Well, this is all just make-believe. I mean, we don't really kill the actors. In fact, we go the opposite way. We make it look as realistic as possible, but we make sure that the actors don't get hurt." I think I kind of disappointed him because shortly after he walked away from me. But maybe Michael Bailey Smith would have had more self-possession to answer that in a more comic way. I didn't know what to say to that. But really, it does underline how people sometimes forget that what they're watching on the screen is is a product of many people, not only the actors and the director, but the editors later on, putting that together to form a scene. Mm-hmm. I have had people, even in personal relationships, confuse me with characters that I've played on stage or on TV film. I mean, I had one person who was convinced I really was as slow as Lenny was, and he saw me do Mice and Men, and he thought that I was really that slow. And you have to just people sometimes just forget that what they're seeing is not reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the rabbits, George.
Oh yes.
So I didn't know you actually played Lenny. That's pretty awesome. Huge fan.
I've played Lenny actually twice. The first time I did it was in '98 at a theater that's in Hollywood that's no longer there, called Something Fish. It was a production that was done, I think, in June of '98. It was a very good production, and I loved playing that role. And then a number of years, that was in '98. About over 10 years later, I got to play it again in a takeoff of John Steinbeck stuff called I don't remember the title right offhand. Anyway, I played Lenny again, but it was a send-up of Mice and Men and the Grapes of Wrath. It was very funny. And we did that in North Hollywood. I'm sorry, not in North Hollywood, in Burbank. And that was just a delightful show. But so I've played Lenny twice.
Which do you find more rewarding, doing a movie or a play?
In terms of artistic, a sense that I'm sharing something with the audience and with a group of people that we're all presenting the story together. I prefer stage work. My guess is that most actors will tell you that they prefer stage work. Now, film and TV are much more lucrative. Mm-hmm. Even on Broadway, unless you're a big star, you're not going to make the money that you make in TV and film. And even if you're a big star, you're just not going to make the money. They just can't. It's just not the way it works. Mm-hmm. I do like working on television film because it's the same process, but it's different. I mean, it's a much more technical sort of thing. You have to, on stage, you get the luxury of experiencing the character and watching the character grow from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. Mm-hmm. Whereas in film and TV, it's chopped up, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. There are some films where the director goes out of his or her way to film in sequence, but most of the time that doesn't happen. Certainly that didn't happen with either Corpses or with Hills of Ice 2, you know. So you have to keep, in film and TV, you have to keep track of where you are in the story and what your character is feeling, and really listen, always listening. So much of acting is listening and reacting rather than acting, you know. Mm-hmm. But in terms of artistic fulfillment, I much prefer stage work because you get that sense. The audience will tell you right away if you're succeeding. Yeah. You know, if you're doing a serious scene and it's absolutely quiet, you know that they're with you and they're listening. Mm-hmm. If you hear candy wrappers crackling, if you hear movement, you know you better start picking up the pace or they're not staying with you. Mm-hmm. You know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to do even more theater work than I did now. I haven't done a play acting on stage in over a year because of some physical problems I've had. But I've worked backstage on a number of shows in the last year or so, and I've really enjoyed that aspect of it too.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned being in a play when you were young, but are there any plays that stick out to you that you saw, you know, that you weren't in but that you saw that made you, you know, want to do more plays? Stage.
Oh yes, I mean, in terms of, do you mean plays or just film, TV, or just plays?
Well, we'll do plays first, and then you can talk about movies after.
Okay, plays. Anything I saw that involved musical theater at the time, I thought that was just incredible. Mm-hmm. It took me a while to get up the courage to do that, but I finally did it. So I actually haven't done any musical theater on stage in quite a while. I do sing, but like I said, because of my physical problems I'm having right now, it's hard for me to be on stage for long periods of time. Hopefully that's going to change. But I mean, anything with musical theater, I remember I saw a production of Hamlet a couple of years ago that a friend of mine did in his living room, with the audience seated all around the actors. And so the actors were always very close to us. So there's no faking anything, mm-hmm. because the audience is right there experiencing the scene with you. And it was a rather interesting production of Hamlet. It started in the middle of the play and went to the end, and that was the first act. And then after the interval, the intermission, you went from the beginning of the play to the middle of the play. So you saw the full circle of the events of the characters. Mm-hmm. And the reason that stuck out for me was because I just loved the theatricality of it. I love the sharing that experience with an audience that was that close. For some actors, that's unnerving, you know. But I loved it. So yeah, I mean, I was just theater. I just love theater. I love watching theater. I love being in the same room with those actors, experiencing that story with them. And you get the thrill of never knowing whether you're going to get from point A to point Z in an evening. Mm-hmm. I mean, something may technically go wrong. Somebody forgets a line. You go up on a line. A prop isn't where it's supposed to be. Something happens to one of the costumes, the set pieces, whatever. You have to keep dealing with it. That's all part of the show. I'm saying a lot of ums here. I'm just trying to.
No, it's fine.
So I guess that's why I find the experience of theater so exciting. Mm-hmm. Even from backstage, watching other actors experience it.
Mm-hmm. And what about movies? What movies really have hit you?
Oh, this is a weird one. But years ago, now this was before we could see it in color, which will date me. I saw The Wizard of Oz. My dad told me, we're going to go over to our neighbor's house and watch The Wizard of Oz. I didn't know what that was. Uh-huh. As I recall, we didn't get right in from the beginning. And I, at that point, loved witches. I was this weird kid who loved witches.
Mhm.
And Margaret Hamilton's Wicked Witch of the West was my favorite character in that movie.
Mhm.
I don't care if she was trying to destroy Dorothy and her friends. I was crushed when Dorothy melted her with a bucket of water.
Uh-huh.
I said to my dad, "Did she do that on purpose?" I mean, but that movie, you know, like it has influenced so many filmmakers and actors over the years. Did so much for me. The fantasy of it, the color of it. Later on, when we were able to see it in color, and then you know, watching things on TV. I remember we used to watch. I was a big Daniel Boone fan with Fess Parker back in the day.
Mhm.
I loved, even though I wasn't born when they came out, but on reruns, I used to love to watch The Munsters and The Addams Family, which kind of buttressed a budding horror fan. I love the Universal monsters, you know, Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, Mummy, etc.
Mhm.
You know, and for many years, those films were unavailable, at least when I was growing up. So you could only see them late at night on television, and usually interrupted with commercials and with horrid cuts in the print that they were using, etc.
Yeah, I used to record them on VHS when I was a kid too. So I always loved the Universal monster movies too.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, yeah. You look at them now, and some of them are obviously the scripts creak. The performances are seem a little dated to us now. But again, they capture the imagination. The writing of them, the best of them really capture the imagination and telling that story. In a way, there were occasionally violent movies, but you know, in those days they had the code, so you couldn't do a lot of overtly gory stuff that you can now. So, I mean, there were a lot of other TV and film that I'm sure influenced me. But those were the ones that come immediately to mind.
And I want to ask about Sushi Girl. I've actually not seen Sushi Girl, but when we talked to Tony Todd, because he was a producer on that, I don't know how big of a role you had in Sushi Girl, but he said that at that year when it came out, it was the most like downloaded movie, illegally downloaded movie, pirated movie. And he said people would actually ask him, like, "Oh, you must be proud of that." And he's like, "No, I'm not proud. I was a producer, so you know he was losing his own money on that." But do you have any memories of Sushi Girl, and do you know anything about piracy of Sushi Girl or movies in general?
Well, I don't know anything about the piracy because I've never done that myself.
Very good.
Honestly, I can be honest and tell you, I'm being honest. I've never done that myself. I remember in addition to being a teacher and actor, I was also a substitute teacher, and so kids would come up to me and recognize me from stuff and say, "Oh, I downloaded that last week. It was great, or it was horrible, or whatever."
Yeah.
And I was like, "You stop downloading it. Pay for it." You know, I didn't say that, of course. Sushi Girl was one of the movies I had a small part in it, but it was a very good part, and I'm really proud I was in that film. I think it was very well written, very well acted. I enjoyed working on that film very much. I loved the twist ending of it, of which I was involved. I had to learn to smoke for that film. I had never smoked.
Oh, really?
In fact, I remember the day that we did it, they said, "Okay, but when you have a cigarette and you throw it away," I said, "Well, am I seen smoking?" He said, "Yeah." Well, I was like, "I don't know how to smoke." And they were, well, fortunately, we had enough time for them. They had a big camera set up. So I had enough time, and I had to have one of the crew people show me how to smoke. And I mastered the craft pretty easily, but I haven't picked up a cigarette since then. So I did learn how to smoke in Sushi Girl.
That's something weird to think of, though, because I've never smoked either. So to think, like, well, I have to do this convincingly, so it looks like I'm not smoking for the first time. I don't think that would be something you would normally think that you have to learn how to do, but it makes total sense.
You know, I said, "Well, do you actually show me smoking?" I'm like, "Can't I just have a cigarette?" He goes, "No, you have to be shown smoking." So I had to learn, and I learned to learn how to puff and where to breathe in and where to exhale, and you know.
Well, what are some of the movies you would like? If people know you from House of a Thousand Corpses and like you in Hills of Ice 2, what are some of the movies that you would like people to check out that they might not talk about as much as the other ones?
Sushi Girl, definitely, if they haven't seen it already. there's some smaller films. There was one called Return to Innsmouth, which had its own kind of cult following. I did about a year into my trip to L.A., I was cast in a Lovecraft film called Returns to Innsmouth, and I flew up to, I think, Portland to do that. That actually turned out very well, although I think looking at it, you can see where budget constraints influence the storytelling, where it's not clear all the time what's going on, which if they'd had the money, I think they could have made more explicit, more clear. So Return to Innsmouth is one of mine. There was a film I did early on called Through a Different Eye. It was the first film I shaved my head for. I had a big head of hair. And I went in and auditioned for this film. It was for Florida State University. It was a graduate student film. It was the film actually I shot before I went out to L.A. But it was a very good script. It was like 25 minutes. And the director said, well, look, would you be willing to get your hair cut for this thing? And I said, well, sure. I mean, I needed a haircut anyway because I had this big, afro-like hair. So I got down to the set in Tallahassee there. And the assistant producer took me over to the barber shop. And he sat me down and told the barber, who they were. And before I knew it, the barber had pulled, back my hair with a comb and plunged a huge clipper down the middle of my head. And I was like, what are you doing? He goes, well, I have to shave your head for the film. I was like, I knew I was going to have my hair cut. I didn't know I was going to have my head shaved. Well, it was too late by then. So, I mean, I wasn't going to back out of it anyway. So with all these people on a Saturday morning watching me, I had all my hair curls shaved off, and then he lather shaved my head like 2 times because they wanted my head as bald as possible. So when he turned me around to look at myself for the first time, it was like, that trauma of seeing yourself without hair. But as it turned out, it worked very well for the film. It was great for the character, and I let my hair grow out. I remember I had shaved it before I shaved it for Return to Innsmouth, and then I started to let it grow back, and then Rob asked me to cut it again for House of a Thousand Corpses. So I decided from that point on, to heck with it. I'm just going to sport a shaved head. So that was my my look for a while.
Do you still have the
so Return to Innsmouth, Through a Different Eye, which played at the Directors Guild in Los Angeles. I don't know if it really went anywhere. In those days, there certainly were film festivals, but they weren't as
it's like prominent as they are today.
Prominent as they are now. There's a lot of film festivals now that there weren't, 20 years ago. I don't know. Ironically, I was working on Return to Innsmouth, and the director of that film I was just speaking of walked in, and he had just moved to the area. I didn't know that he was going to show up. Talk about small world. Arrested Development, I've gotten a lot of recognition from. I don't know if you've seen that show. It's not a horror show by any means. It's a comedy.
But
it's very fun.
I love Arrested Development, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I've gotten a lot of recognition out of that, which is nice. I've had people say, they shouldn't have killed off your character. You should have come back. Well, that's the way it goes.
Which, and it's cool that it's come back. It's cool now that this kind of, because that never happened when I was a kid, where if a TV show was canceled, that was the end of it. But now, the last few years, TV shows come back, years after they've been off television.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and getting the DVDs of them. I mean, I didn't realize how funny Arrested Development was until I did an Arrested Development marathon and got all 3 seasons. And watched them on a weekend back to back. And I just laughed and laughed. And I thought, I'm so glad I was a part of this because it was a great show.
Definitely, yeah. And that's another thing that's just happened over the last so many years with Netflix and DVDs being affordable and stuff is binge watching, being able to watch, a whole series of TV shows.
Yeah. That's how I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's how I watched X-Files up to a certain season. That's how I got to know those shows, by watching them episode to episode, because I can't stand the commercials that are on regular television.
I agree.
When they come out on DVD, I love it. That show Oz, I really like that way.
I
there was another show with Michael Chiklis.
The Shield.
Shield. Oh my God, that was a good show.
I was the same way.
I auditioned for that and I didn't get it.
Oh, really? I was the same way. It was, I guess, a few years ago now. I watched it for the first time, and and I was just hooked and watched the whole series.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is in your face. It is not politically correct.
No.
It is very raw. It's very real. Like I said, I had an audition for it once and didn't get it, and oh well. But
and
that was a great show too.
Walton Goggins is great in that. Who is also in
wonderful. Yes. And, he's a wonderful actor.
Yeah. And it's one of the best endings of a series, I thought. It's really powerful. And then,
nihilistic. I mean, you just feel like your whole world has been swept out, and yet you know somehow that isn't the end of the story.
No. Then there was talks for a while that there was going to be a movie, but there never happened. But I kind of like it, where it just leaves it up to your imagination. You know what happens to to his character.
You don't know exactly. Well, just like in real life, you don't know exactly what's going to happen to everybody.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Which I know some people have a problem with the ending of Sopranos, but I always kind of like the ending because it's just you don't know what's gonna happen. There was no ending to him. It was just
ends very abruptly, as if we've had this privilege of watching these people's lives for a certain amount of time, and then that was it. Our privilege was revoked.
Right.
I got into watching that show because my uncle up here in Michigan was really into it. And I started watching some episodes of it with me. And then when I got back to California, I bought the entire series so I could watch it from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I remember coming in January and February afternoons after school and watching it for 2.5 and 3 hours, and telling myself, okay, no, not another episode. Save it for tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
Because I would love watching it after I got done with school when I came in every day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know that feelings very well. That's how I was with The Shield. I think I'll watch one more, and you end up watching it for hours.
Yeah, I mean, I would wait for that thing to come out on DVD, the seasons to come out on DVD, and watch them back to back. Mm-hmm. I had at one point all of the seasons of that. I'd have to buy the whole series now. I think I sold it or something in the meantime, in the interim. Yeah. But I'd love to get that again.
Mm-hmm. How can people follow you online? Are you on social media?
Well, I'm on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't do Twitter or Instagram though.
Yeah. So let me follow you on the Facebook. And do you have any appearances or anything coming up?
No, I will be making scheduled to make my directing debut for a play in the area. The play based on that movie, A Christmas Story. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be doing the play version here in Rochester Hills at the Avon Players this coming Christmas.
Oh, sweet! That's
it's
one
the
of my
first time I've
movies.
directed, even though I've certainly handled a number of pageants and I had a lot of acting experience and watched a number of wonderful directors. A little nervous about it because I haven't tried it, but I figured, you know what? Just do it. Just do it and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Well. Good luck with that. That's very cool.
Yeah, I would love to do more films. I hope to. Here in Michigan, though, I mean, our governor took away the financial incentive. There was a lot of film work here in Michigan for a while, and then a couple of years ago, from what I understand, he took away the financial or the tax incentive, and so there is some filming done here, but not nearly as much as there was, like even 5 years ago.
I was at a convention in Kalamazoo, and it was a good thing you didn't go to that one. It was a big dud, but I remember Sid was there, and it was very. I wish I had my video camera out because he had asked Sid to sign his tattoo, but the tattoo was on his ass, and so it was just like it was a very weird. It was a weird moment.
Oh, I've heard stories. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned Kalamazoo because I was actually raised in Kalamazoo from the age of 9 till about the time I was in my early 20s when I moved to Atlanta to teach. So I appeared a lot at the Kalamazoo Civic Theater there and did a lot of theater in town at the Western Michigan University. But I haven't been to Kalamazoo. I was through Kalamazoo about 1.5 years ago. I still have relatives that live there.
Yeah. It was a nice area, but the convention didn't do it.
Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah. I mean, Michigan, our autumns and our summers and springs are lovely. I can't stand the winters, though. All the snow and ice. Mm-hmm. You may ask why I moved back, but that's another phone call.
Well, I really had a great time talking to you.
Well, I enjoyed it too. It was wonderful to reminisce and bring back to memory a lot of these things I hadn't talked about in a while, and share it with someone who obviously is as passionate about the forum as I am.
Very cool. And, you're welcome. Come back anytime.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to come back and talk to you. If you have any other questions, just give me a call.
Excellent. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
This is Irwin Keyes, and you are listening to WithoutYourHead.com, baby.